Well, thank you for having me, the Prosper Historical Society. If you listened to the words of the two songs that the choir sang, they said it all. That was both the national anthem and the secondary national anthem, if you recognize those tunes. And the words in them say everything that we really ought to say. But what a privilege it is to be with you tonight on Veterans Day. This is obviously one of my favorite holidays. But I want to ask you, why are we here this evening? Why are you here? Why should we remember? Why does Prosper Historical Society host this event every year? Is it because we want to relive our youth? Is it because we want to remember how good we were in our youth? Do we want to remember because one of these days we will go the way of all the earth, turn it over to our kids and our grandkids? Why are we here this evening? Is it just to remember? Well, I submit to you that that's not enough. We cherish our memories. I walked around and introduced myself to some of the veterans this evening, and you can tell that they cherish their memories. Those were times that meant a lot in our lives. Everyone that served, regardless of where you served. But we remember our veterans not only to remember their sacrifice, but also because we want the citizens of Prosper, years in the future, to know what the veterans accomplished for them, for Prosper, and for America. Not only to remember, but to inspire and to motivate, to encourage, to give a vision that America will be worthy of veterans in every generation. To keep alive that beautiful definition of a veteran penned by Francis Scott Key in the 4th stanza of our national anthem as he watched the Battle of Fort McHenry rage all night long. Thus be it ever, that free men shall stand between their loved homes and the war's desolation. That's a veteran. That's what our veterans do today, more than 200 years later. Veterans today have an honored place in our nation, but those of us of a certain age remember when veterans were not so honored, some 50 years ago during Vietnam. But I tell you, that period was not normal during our nation's history. Famous names roll off of our tongues: Valley Forge, Fort Sumter, Gettysburg, San Juan Hill, Normandy, Battle of the Bulge, Guadalcanal, Cho Sen Reservoir, Tet Offensive, and now Fallujah. But there are thousands upon thousands of other battles, unnamed and unremarked, in which veterans fought. They fought, or they supported with gunfire or supplies. They transported fighting men and women or equipment. They provided signal support or logistical support. As George Patton once said, they ate, they slept, they fought as a team. Everyone contributed, regardless of their job. Some question whether America has lost its moral compass. Our citizens and our institutions will debate that issue. And frankly, I look forward to continuing the debate because it's necessary. But while we debate, our young servicemen and women will continue to serve and sacrifice with honor, even as that debate goes on within our nation. As General Douglas MacArthur said more than 50 years ago at my alma mater, West Point, through all this welter of change and development, your mission remains fixed, determined, inviolable. It is to win our wars. Everything else in your professional career is but corollary to this vital dedication. All other public purpose, all other public projects, all other public needs, great and small, will find others for their accomplishment. But you are the ones that are trained to fight. Yours is the profession of arms, the will to win, the sure knowledge that in war there is no substitute for victory, that if you lose, the nation will be destroyed, that the very obsession of your public service must be duty, honor, country. Our veterans today, our service members today, continue to live under that creed regardless of what you read in the newspaper. Several years ago, I took part in an event that I will never forget. It was designed to help veterans with any issues they might have with their records, with the Veterans Administration. I asked a World War II vet if I could take a look at his equivalent of our modern day DD-214, his discharge papers. He gave them to me, and unsolicited, he apologized to me because his papers indicated that he had been a cook, but he told me the papers were wrong. I asked what he meant, and he, in a very chagrined voice, now this is the World War II veteran, in a very chagrined voice, said that he actually fought across northern Europe as an infantryman, but that his last assignment before he was discharged had been as a cook. So his discharge paper said he was a cook. Now stop and imagine this. An infantryman who fought all the way across northern Europe was apologizing to me. The world was upside down that day. But I made sure that he understood that I was honored to even be in the presence of someone who actually did the things that inspired me, that I studied at West Point more than 20 years later, that inspired me to become an infantryman. How much I owe him, how much our nation owes him, and he was apologizing to me. If nothing else, that day I tried to do what Prosper is doing today for your veterans. Make sure that he knew that I honored his service, whether as a cook or as an infantryman. I applaud Prosper Historical Society for leading the way in this event this evening. So we remember and honor those who showed us the way in hopes that we can show the way for the next generation. Show that sacrifice, yes, sacrifice may be necessary to defend our way of life. Let's face it, deployments in war zones are not comfortable or safe. Deployments mean time away from home, often in harm's way. And today, deployment after deployment after deployment in harm's way. Until we see a change in national policy, these sacrifices will not change. Long and repetitive deployments, often in harm's way, require we who remain at home to commit ourselves to support the young Americans who volunteer to go abroad for us. We need to provide the best equipment possible. We need to continue to push medical care as far forward as possible to save as many lives as possible. Congressman Johnson tells a story about a wounded American in the Middle East who was going to receive the most intensive surgical operation possible, one helicopter ride away from combat zone. We need to provide adequate health care for veterans after they return. Health care, both physical and mental, is vital for our veterans. But there's one more thing we need to provide to our service members: support for their families prior to, during, and after deployment. Spouses serve as well. They serve differently, but they serve as well. I will never forget that after I deployed to Grenada with the 82nd Airborne Division, my wife Tracy said she would never mistake an exercise, and there were lots of exercises, she would never again mistake an exercise for a deployment. I just didn't come home one day and the aircraft were leaving Pope Air Force Base on a very regular basis. There was no mistaking what we were doing. Shirley Johnson, the wife of Congressman Sam Johnson, didn't know that he was alive or dead for 2 years after he was shot down. And every spouse has similar stories. And that doesn't even include the fear of uniformed officers coming to your door with grim news, the possibility. But along with those commitments, we also need to provide young Americans a vision, a reason for their sacrifice. That starts by remembering and honoring those who have gone before, those who sacrificed before, those who demonstrated how to sacrifice. But it also includes a vision of moral clarity, a vision of victory, a vision of support for our enemies, for our allies, and victory over our enemies. A vision that sadly we lack today. I applaud Prosper for hosting this Veterans Day ceremony, specifically the Prosper Historical Society. You are demonstrating to your citizens that we will not forget those who went, those who served, those who sacrificed, those we call veterans. And you are inspiring young Americans to serve, and yes, to sacrifice. It's not a word we use often in today's world. I wish there would be no future sacrifice, but we all know there will be. There will always be someone on some future battlefield, as yet unknown and unnamed, who will challenge our very existence. We wish that it were not so, but wishes don't change the world. Young Americans who go abroad in harm's way change the world, just as our veterans have done down through the centuries. And some young American may volunteer to go in harm's way because they know that Prosper has their back and that Prosper will not forget when they return. I want to thank all my brothers in arms, sisters in arms, if you're here. I want to thank you for your service. I want to thank you that I can call you a veteran, a fellow veteran. God bless our veterans. God bless our fighting forces. God bless Texas and the United States. Thank you for having me this evening.